One.
Boom. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Miles on the Grid episode. I believe we're at episode 7.5, technically episode 7 because we already did a bit of a short yesterday. In today's episode, we're meeting Cameron from Cameron F1. You'll know him; he's a legend. Dare I say, a wordsmith of the best variety.
Too kind.
No,
Too kind, sir.
there's very few of you on Twitter who can put a narrative together, who can understand and, dare I say, discuss a variety of factors relating to an event like Abu Dhabi, but we're not going to go over this this show. But really, Cameron's been around the block, and he's got, I believe, you're 8.5 thousand YouTube subscribers at the moment.
Yeah, around something like that, Miles. Not that I'm counting or anything.
Let's get this man to 10K. You know, he's not far, and we want to see him thrive and continue to grow. But Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. It's a privilege being here, mate. Ready to chop it up around some automotive pugilism. Let's go. The thing that we love in F1. Loving it. And congratulations on all your good work, mate. What the hell? Need to pay that compliment forward. Absolutely murdering the podcast game out here. Good to see your face on camera. Too good looking to Dusty, mate. You've got a face for YouTube out here, Miles. I mean, come on.
My brother said the same thing, but I'm a bit too shy and a bit too
behave yourself.
A bit too crazy for me.
Behave.
I appreciate it. But look, I think the best way for us to sort of kick off is forget like the how are yous, like we did that off screen. Everyone can assume that you're good, hopefully. But where did your love for F1 and motorsport in general come from? Like what made you Cameron F1?
It's a good question. So my genesis story is that my dad got me a Sky Electrics way back in the day when I was a young pup. So that was the John Player Special FW14 Sky Electrics. I was just obsessed with that from a young age. And then my dad always used to watch. My first memory was 94, the Schumacher and Damon Hill Adelaide. That was the first proper season that I watched. Me and my dad watched that season finale live.
Nice.
And then Cameron F1, mate. I'm a loudmouth on him. I've got things to say, mate. I enjoy the back and forth and F1 debate, mate. I'll talk to you about anything. And if it's F1, then there's so many things to say, being a hot topic at the moment and always, really. I suppose Cameron F1 kicked off in 2016. And the inception of Cameron F1 was just arguing with mates. Guy and Justin, my boys from back in Birmingham, we all had different opinions. Who's the best? Seb Vatelli's, said Guy, and he was a Schumacher fan actually, and I hated Schumacher at the time. We were just arguing anyway on the phone, and I was like, lads, why don't we just put this on wax? We're gonna have more conversations. I'm gonna phone Justin, and then afterwards I'm gonna have to phone Guy and have the same bloody conversation. So why don't we just have one and put it on YouTube? And that's kind of how that's how the channel started off way back when in 2016.
Nice. And I think it always starts from those, I don't want to say those WhatsApp chats, those banter chats, but something where you know that you're always going to get a difference of opinion. You're always going to have someone who, let's say, is going to put Max Verstappen as the GOAT versus Senna versus Lewis versus, I don't know, Damon Hill, for example, even though we know he's not. and that's with all respect to Damon. But I think it's interesting you mentioned that you got that idea to sort of kickstart YouTube from that. One, you were ahead of the game because not a lot of people were doing that back then. I think you had people like Chain Bear, Josh Ravel. So you're one of the historians, dare I say. You're one of the Mount Rushmore people.
It's a very polite way of putting it there, Mars. Old, I think, is the term that you're looking for. I feel like I was one of the original. I'm trying to think who was about back in the day. Not many, maybe Chain Bear.
Yeah.
But there weren't many talking heads that focused on F1 when I kicked off. And there definitely weren't many podcasts that were having the debate. And I suppose in that sense, it's a shame that I didn't have the fortitude or foresight to stay consistent in 2016. And I suppose that, if I'm honest with you, Miles, was a function of the fact that F1 it wasn't juicy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What brought me back on is Silverstone last year.
Okay.
when that happened, I was like, mate, I've got something to say. I need to put the camera on. This is a hot topic, an incident that's full of juice and rancor, and I need to dissect it and have the conversation. Who was at fault? A bit of back and forth. So that's kind of when I dusted the channel back off again and jumped back in there.
Well, I mean, you raised it. I wasn't going to touch on it straight away. But if we think about, let's say, like the biggest issues in motorsport right now, it's tribalism, right? Especially on social media. You've got, I'm not going to name the section of fans, but you've got different fans from across the globe repping each different driver as if they're a prize fighter, as if they're in the ring actually giving out money to everyone, right? What's your take on I don't want to say F1 Twitter because that's probably the most what's the nicest word? The most vocal, but but what is your take on the tribalism that we're now seeing in the sport, both at track and online as well?
Oh, Mars, it's such a loaded question, isn't it?
It is.
I hate it. I really, really dislike it, and it's a bit. It sounds rich me saying that seconds after I said that I like a bit of back and forth and a bit of argument when it's juicy. I enjoy those times, but there's a way. I'm as much about the hows and the whys as the whats, Miles. So I kind of want to, if we're going to argue, can't we just argue nicely? To quote the legend that is Josh Revel,
yes,
don't be a menace about it, man. Just don't be. Why do you have to be a douchebag about everything? Yeah, you love Max, or yeah, you love Lewis.
Yeah.
But why does that necessitate, I don't know, putting down the other side? And I don't know. Passion is really, really good. And that's kind of what's been driving the sport forward, I think, Miles. But I just find it really sad that people allow that to spill over into toxicity and burning effigies. And but, well, you don't support my chap, so you're a this, that, and the other. Why can't we just all enjoy one of the greatest spectacles in F1 in the world and just be nice about it? So in a nutshell, the answer to your question is, Moz, I don't like it. I wish, listen, I'd pay a lot of money if I could vanish it out of F1 and sports, full stop. It's not just F1, but it's prevalent in, football's worse, to be fair.
Football is terrible.
Football is worse, right? Terrible. It is worse. But yeah, mate, I don't like it. And I suppose on the back of the season that was 2021, it's like the I suppose the back and forth between Lewis and Max only exacerbated the toxicity, right? I don't know why it has to be. Why can't people just celebrate maybe you call me naive for saying this, but why can't we just celebrate when our driver or our drivers respectively do well? Why does it always have to spill over into the Schadenfreude and celebrate when the other drivers in the barrier? And honestly, Mars, I don't get it, mate. It really upsets me and it perplexes me. But mate, I suppose the salient point is that it's always going to be there, and maybe I need to get with the program and stop hoping that Santa Claus delivers my Christmas presents through the chimney this year as well.
I mean, he does deliver your Christmas presents. Let's keep that one going. But I get you. I think it's definitely a situation which needs to be addressed. And I'm not saying that a driver needs to come out and say, look, put aside all this crap, but a driver does need to come out and say, look, put aside all this crap. We're all human beings. We all race. Like, you don't have to be best mates with everyone at work. You know, that's never going to be the case. They're colleagues, but they're working against each other at the same time, right? So why can't we see it in the same vein that, hey, you know, I'm going to work with this person on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. I'm going to have a conversation. You know, Charles Leclerc may be the greatest qualifier of all time, just using that as a reference point. But, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to celebrate when he leaves like a plane room of width at France. Like, or it doesn't. It doesn't matter.
Rejoicing in somebody else's downfall. I will say this, Moz, as a case study, I've always been puzzled at the difference in the rugby fan base and the football fan base, right? Because a rugby fan base would never boo a referee. They would never celebrate in somebody else's getting injured or somebody else's downfall. And I think, without sounding a bit too pompous, I really think this is all a function of length of service in the sport and education, right? Because I think rugby bods are all private school educated and grammar school, whereas your rugby louts are like me and are like, let's go. or the dangerous offensive chants, right? So I think that's got something to do with it. And I think because we've got a lot of new fans in the sport, again, I don't want to get into the big gatekeeping thing, but I think that potentially it is a driver. I think that has something to do with it. But the quicker that the powers that be can at least do something to try and stamp this out, the better, I say, Miles, because it sucks.
No, agreed. No, I won't. I can't lay weight to the claim of like the rugby. I'm not sure whether you're going like rugby league for that stuff or rugby
Oh
union.
no, union.
Or
No,
what?
league and football is the same thing, mate.
Yeah.
It's the same fan base, but union.
I'm not offending any league followers who are up in the north. Yeah, listen. Just before I get into trouble with any of my friends who play league, I've played union, but I respect your sport. Cameron, go on.
Yeah, no, I think, I don't want to disrespect anyone here and get into the old class debate, but I just think, listen, mate, I wherever the silver bullet is, wherever the panacea is that solves all of the ills of the sport and reduces dramatically the amount of toxicity that we're seeing at the moment, because it is at its zenith at the moment, Mars. Let's be honest. We saw Nelson Piquet the other day. Yuri Vips just killing it. Max Verstappen's bloody lack of it's just the last 6-7 weeks was just like every day there was something else that was killing it, right? So yeah, I just want to watch some racing, Miles. I'm a simpleton, mate, and I don't want to have to jump on camera and put a mic in front of my face and start talking to all these controversial issues. I would rather not, if I'm honest with you, mate.
No, I agree. So I mean, moving swiftly along, because I don't think it's not helpful mentally for us to focus on those things. One thing I would say is that the sport has come a long way in terms of how it's addressed certain issues. In the past, they wouldn't even be addressed as you would know from watching from '94. However, there's a long way to go, and until we recognize that as a collective sport, regardless of who we cheer for, simp for, fan base after, or even just think about the sport as a whole, we're not going to get there. But that's a conversation for another day, and people can take that up on Twitter. Just don't argue with me. I'm not going to respond, right? I'm not doing it. So thinking about this year in F1, we've seen the new regulations. We've got wider cars, heavier cars, cars that technically should be able to follow a lot quicker or a lot better because of a lack of dirty air. Although dirty air is still a thing. I'm not going to get into the way that I think it's Pat Lowe was speaking about that. But what would you say has been the best or even the biggest moment for you during this first half of a championship season?
Oh, there's been a few, hasn't there? I suppose it depends on what angle you want to come at it from, Miles. From an enjoyment perspective, I really enjoyed the DRS chicken between Charles Leclerc and Max earlier on in the season. I thought that was brilliant. And again, I'm in it for racing, Miles, I'll be honest. Wheel-to-wheel battles and racecraft is what I want to see between the best drivers in the best machinery, right? Yes. And I think that was a brilliant example of it. I love the way that Charles was ultimately in that race able to outfox a wily Max Verstappen with that DRS chicken. Go on then, mate. You go ahead of me. Outbreak yourself into this turn one. And I'll have the DRS for the next couple. Racing chess, not checkers, Miles. And on the back of that, we all got enthusiastic, right? I thought, right, okay, so whilst Lewis in a season that it looks like Lewis ostensibly doesn't have the machinery to fight a Max Verstappen, Charles does. And if Charles pulling maneuvers like that, then Charles is our guy, right? So we all got super excited about the battle that was promised in 2022, but since, Miles, as we all know, it hasn't quite panned out that way, has it, Cameron?
I mean, let me give you a bit of context. When it comes to the levels of pain at the moment, and I know people are going through some serious stuff in the UK. UK's nuts right now. I'm a Manchester United fan.
Oh, mate, don't do it, Miles.
I'm a Ferrari fan.
Oh, don't do it,
and
Miles.
I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. So you can only imagine how the pain was compounded. Interest rates are put on top of it. And then I had nowhere to go on a Sunday. It was literally just one thing after another. And then I had real life to deal with. So
Don't
I
do it, Miles.
I got behind Charles. I was like, yes, finally someone that can, dare I say, go as aggressive as Max can. Like Lewis was never going to go to those pre-2012 levels. He just wasn't. Like he's not that. I won't say he's not that driver anymore. He doesn't think that way anymore. Whereas Charles showed a different like angle to his game. It was like dovetailing. Like you said, he let Max outbreak himself. He
Loved
thought,
it,
okay,
mate.
cool. I'm in. Like up and under. There was so much to
Loved it.
gain. But then we go to Saudi and Max started playing
Has
chicken with Charles.
learned. Oh my
Right?
gosh,
And
Miles.
I'm not saying that I'm the biggest Max fan. I used to be. I had the hat, everything. It ended up
Still got
waterlogged.
that over here somewhere.
That could have
I
been a.
can't wear it ever again, apparently. Not allowed.
No, mine disappeared. I feel sorry. I don't feel sorry for anyone that wears one because I respect what Max does. So feel free to rep. Like that's not an issue. We are honest people on this channel. But I think from a perspective of pure racing, I thought, okay, Max has taken his game to another level as well. Like last year at Saudi, he was. I'm not going to use the word which I saw on the timeline today. I think you may have seen the same one, the same picture. Max was using all sorts of tricks, skullduggery, everything in order to try and either crash into Lewis, cause him to be out of a championship fight. But this year, it's like he's taken some of that canniness. He's understood that he needs to peg back in a certain way. He's got the team around him. Like he's fully got that team around him now. Like that's an aspect which we're going to touch on as well, because I don't think people realize what Jenson Button says about putting that or making and building that team around you. It actually makes such a difference.
Mate.
Such a difference. Like
absolutely, mate. So first off, if I can respond to that, Miles, from the perspective of a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, how dare you give Max Verstappen any credit? I'll get that out of the way first, and then I will talk from my own personal perspective. Mate, you've just nailed it. Max Verstappen, again, I was talking on Spaces yesterday about the hypothetical Max Verstappen versus Sir Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery in 2022, and I just don't know. The only reason that I had a lot of confidence of my driver, Sir Lewis Hamilton, beating Max Verstappen before is because Max always used to make bloody mistakes and he didn't learn from them. Very similar to what we're seeing from Charles. If you go back a couple of years, Max Verstappen was an error merchant and a crash merchant at that. Not seeing it so much anymore, Miles. So where my confidence is a function of what? Well, I can't have the same confidence anymore because he's learning, like you said, he's evolving. Even race on race, like you said, Charles nailed him with the DRS tricking, tried the same trick a couple of weeks later, or the next race at least, and Max had wised up, right, and ultimately won that race. So he's whatever you want to say about him as a person, as a driver, Miles, racing chess, not checkers out here is what Max Verstappen's going on with. And I fear, again, blasphemous, Cameron. I fear that even if Lewis does have the proper machinery next year, that the rate of evolution that we're seeing in Max Verstappen as a driver might still make it very problematic, let's say, to beat him.
I might have to counter you, and that's not me trying to like.
Mate, let's do it. Let's talk about it, Miles.
So this has been something that's been going off in our in one of the group chats, Harman. I think Max is a fantastic racer. No, sorry, I take that back. I think Max is a very fast driver, possibly the fastest in F1 right now. Like Lewis will eventually start to decline. His age, unfortunately, will start to show that. But when it comes to racecraft, that's where I still have I don't say a question mark over Max, but if we compare the level of competition, Charles is elite. He always at that elite level. He's just about to sort of break through, have his Fernando Alonso 2005 moment if he somehow rallies back from the points deficit, which I can't see, sadly. But is he the level of competition that Lewis is when it's wheel to wheel? I don't think so. And I think the pressure that we saw from Lewis last year in those last 4 races, and let's not even get into the whole Brazil debacle where
that was bad.
That was up against the wall, and then Qatar where all sorts of things were tried. I thought that Max had the championship nailed at Koto last year. The drive that he put on to
incredible, Brigman.
Incredible. And I'm there staring, screaming at my TV, thinking, okay, that's it. Lewis, you're done. Come back next year. Mercedes, stop it. Like, it's over. He's already, like, in a fight, he's already dead. Let him get back up. Lewis then put on a clinic, and we got to Saudi, and Max all of a sudden seemed to, in the words of Adrian Newey, he lost it. He couldn't seem to, like, he was cutting curbs, he was pushing wide, he was brake checking, which is factual. We can look at the data.
Is crazy. The brake checking is daft.
It's dumb, it's dangerous, and should have been an instant ban. I'm not going to get into that. Whatever happened, and then Abu Dhabi, etc. Although he got smoked up for lights, just saying, on mediums. But when we think about the level of competition that Lewis brings and the racecraft of constantly pressurizing to the end, there's like, if you look at Holland last year, you look at USA last year, you look at Mexico, you look at Abu Dhabi, sadly, even with those worn tires, Lewis brings that element of, you know what, you can kick me whilst I'm down, I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to push on, right? And I don't think that Max has had to show that same level of doggedness, which he showed last year, this year. And that's where my question mark is, because I think he's elite. I think Max is, gotta be careful now, I don't want Lewis stands on my back. Max is top 12 drivers of all time.
Already
in F1 right now.
Blasphemous, Miles! How very dare you?
Yeah, just based. I know you're joking, but just based on stats, like, we can't say Alonso's up there and not Max. We can't. We cannot say that.
Oh, bloody Dora, Miles! There's a lot that I need to unpick there. Still, there is a lot.
Don't get me wrong. Alonso raced against the GOAT. Max raced against the GOAT.
True.
Alonso raced in a Renault that technically was better than the Ferrari. Technically, I'm not going to, like, Max raced against Lewis in a car that was technically better than the Mercedes up until, it's hard because it wasn't better.
Brazil, the new engine. Yeah,
maybe Turkey even, maybe, because Valtteri Bottas absolutely smoked it, and Lewis had the penalty. But
yeah,
that's my question mark about Max. It's not that he's not elite; it's how elite is he? Is he the Prost to Lewis's Senna, or is he Senna to Lewis's Prost? Is he Fangio to Clark? Is he, is he
Techie Miles?
Is he Graham Hill? Is he, what are we talking about?
Like, mate,
go on. Where I lead.
There's a few, geez, Miles, dropping bombs out here. Okay, so there's a few things I want to pick out. So firstly, to I've heard a lot of people, Thanos on Spaces most notably, say that Max isn't tested yet. And I would agree, if we're going to place in brackets as a suffix around that sentence, this year. Last year, Miles, how much more testing of a person's metal and steel and mental fortitude do you need than to have a charging, fire-breathing GOAT in Sir Lewis Hamilton?
Yeah.
Breathing down your neck. I just don't understand. And I suppose you could argue in like the latter quarter of that season, he wasn't at his immaculate best, let's say. He had an epic Sector 1, Sector 2, two of the best sectors I've ever seen on a qualifying lap around Jeddah. Miles, listen, let me tell you, there are a rare few, when you're watching sport, there's a brilliant book by Simon Barnes called The Meaning of Sport. And he talks really glowingly and in this, he just puts all these he's brilliant. I definitely recommend the book. And he speaks about these few times in sports where sportsmen elevate to this. You're watching it and you just get goosebumps, right? It becomes something more than sport.
Yes. True.
Sector 1, Sector 2 Miles. Okay, so he binned it and it's all irrelevant. Nobody cares. He didn't even get the lap in. Sector 1, Sector 2 Miles. I challenge you to watch that back and not get goosebumps. It just looks like he's doing something that car shouldn't be doing. No time left on that circuit. So at his brilliant best, he's very, very, very good, Miles. I suppose untested this year, but last year, mate, Cota's the case in point, eh? Yeah, where did he get that speed from, Miles? I still don't know. How was he managing? Who again? Okay, so this for me is the litmus test, Miles. I'm not sure of too many drivers. I think Vettel did it a couple of times back in the day when he had that Red Bull.
Yes.
I'm not sure I can cite too many examples of a driver who's fended off Sir Lewis Hamilton in the closing stages of a Grand Prix on a charge on fresher tyres. I can probably name a couple, maybe 2 or 3 examples ever in history. And Max Verstappen last year around Kota added his name to that list. So automatically for me, Mars, do my fair test, that means that Max Verstappen's ceiling as far as his potential is super, super high, tangenting very nicely into your GOAT conversation, Mars. I don't think he's there yet. I wouldn't put him necessarily. I think it's premature to say top 10. But
top 12.
Even top 12, I think I wouldn't put him alongside. I wouldn't put him alongside like Alonso or Matt. He just hasn't done enough yet. I don't think we've seen enough for it. But do I doubt for a second, Miles, that once all is said and done, and the Max Verstappen F1 career is closed as a book, do I doubt that he'll be top 5, top 4, dare I say, top 3? Ooh. Absolutely not, Miles. He'll be up there. I promise you. Let's revisit in a few years. I promise you, we will reconvene.
No, I agree. I slightly disagree on the top 4, just because I'm hoping that Lewis retains some sort of legacy, because people are keen to put him down from being the GOAT and down to like 2 or 3.
Who you got in your top 4 then, Miles? Let's talk about this while we're on the GOAT. It's Tekie.
I'm so grateful I'm not live streaming this right now, because I'm going to get blamed.
Mate, you've got to go for it in no particular order. Who are your top 4?
Okay. Sir Lewis Hamilton, or Sir Lewis Labasse Hamilton, whichever way he wants it. Number 1. In terms of number 2, Michael Schumacher. To me, there's... If it's not Lewis, it's Michael. You can't have one without the other.
I would agree with that.
Jordan to LeBron. There is no difference, in my opinion. Thirdly, and this is going to cause some consternation on...
I think I know exactly what you're going to say.
Jim Clark.
Oh, wow. True.
Jim Clark.
Fair play.
I mean, I wasn't around. I don't think any of us were. But having watched some of this stuff and having read about what he did and looking at his win ratio and his pole to win ratio, that's dumb. Like, it's just stupid to think that someone could do it. And yes, he sadly is no longer with us. And that's not to say that adds to his legend. I think there's no way that anyone could come in now, especially with a manual gearbox. We think it's all DCT and, SMG gearboxes or DSG gearbox. The dude was doing it with a stick and his pedal, So I think Jim is up there at 3. He could even be 2, but I don't need Ferrari on my back, because I do want to get a couple people on the pod. I'm talking to you, Vincenzo. Please come on. And I think at number 4, this is going to be very controversial, super controversial. I've got massive love for Sebastian Vettel, in particular with what he's done in the last couple of years. I've got love for Albert Ascari in terms of being that 1950s champion. And if I've got it wrong, please someone correct me in the comments. I do think, on pure talent alone, Alain Prost is up there. Ayrton Senna is up there. But I'm going to be biased. Actually, no, sod it. I don't want to get flamed. No, sod it. I'm going to keep that one to myself. Okay, I'll say at number 4, Alain Prost.
That's the correct answer.
and with a close hint behind, Ayrton Senna, and then Fernando Alonso, and then Seb, and then we'll be done.
Let's go. I can't disagree. I'm glad that you said Prost was who I thought you were going to say for 3.
Prost was maybe 2 for me. Just
Prost has got to be style. Prost has got to be okay. So not the best in the wet. That's his Achilles heel, right? Yeah, but everything else, Miles, like just a points machine, right? And you just want that guy who's going to pick up points every race. Hard to beat. I'm telling you. I'd pick Prost over Senna.
Who would you say are your top 5?
I think you've just called them out. I think I'd go Mr. Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reagan, the Red Baron, Mr. Schumacher.
Okay, yeah.
But I'd love to. I haven't seen enough of Clark to talk to it seriously. I know everybody that I trust, experts, aficionados, top 3 Jim, but I'd be disingenuous to say Jim Clark because I haven't seen him. So I can't. He's kind of out of scope for me. I'd put the Professor Alan Prost in 3.
Nice.
Would I go Senna? Senna's a tough one, Miles. I tell you why Senna's a tough one. Because Senna got me into the game, right? That was my first season. Yeah. But since I don't know, I don't want to talk. I don't even know if I'm going to get your podcast cancelled if I start talking bad about Senna. But a lot of people who were around Ayrton at the time have since come out and said, yeah, he was a bit egotistical and masqueraded as like this church-going Brazilian and loved his family and all this other stuff. But then he bloody send Prost into the barrier and potentially kill him off. So you've got this weird dichotomy with Ayrton. Like he'd jump out the car and go and save a guy that potentially could burn in the cockpit. But then he'd park his car on Martin Brundle's head. He's like, well, like, do you know what I mean? A walking, talking contradiction. And I'm not sure. But we're talking about driving, so I'll put that to the side, separate the person from the driver, Cameron. In 4th, I will put, I've got to put Senna, Monaco on board. In 5, who am I putting? I don't know, Miles, this is too hard. Maybe I'll just put Clark. Just again, I will defer to the old school aficionados because they've told me that he has to be top 5, even though I've never seen him properly. He was clearly an enigma of a natural talent.
Fair enough. I mean, 5 is a tough one, right? Because you could have anyone from Alonso, Vettel,
flipping Nora. There you go with
Jackie
Alonso.
Stewart,
Alonso is a tough one to exclude from the top 5. I really rate Alonso very highly, Mars. Contrary to popular opinion, again, this is the thing about. I suppose this is looping back to your original question about toxicity.
Yes.
The inability to separate your objective from the subjective is something that's prevalent, let's say, in the F1 social media space. And here's what I mean by that. Fernando Alonso is not a fantastic person outside of the cockpit, right? We've seen it, Spygate, Crashgate with PK Jr., the spats with Sir Lewis Hamilton. He's got a very patchy track record in his dealing with teammates and team personnel. He's not a great guy, but what he is a great of, Miles, is a driver. He's bloody incredible. Big man. He's unbelievable. Did you see him the other day? I can't remember where is it. Was it Austria? Did you see he start procedure?
Yeah, it was dumb. It was
when he was but before, not the actual start of the race. When they do in their practice starts. I think I want to say it was in FP3 when he refused that he knew that K-Mag was going to be stopped, and he refused to lay any rubber on the actual the white start piece. Like he started from further back. He's just on a different level, Miles. Let's be clear. As far as situational awareness in a car, Miles, and again, I'm going to get you cancelled for talking so glowingly about Alonso. But if you speak to anyone that's been in and around F1 and around Alonso specifically, they'll tell you he's like a racing computer in that cockpit, Miles. He'll know the splits. He'll know who's ahead of him, who's behind him. He'll know the lap number. He'll know what lap he's coming. He's sick. Give that dude his flowers, even though he's not a great guy. But I'm bringing you off here, Miles. Sorry, I'm tangenting.
No, I mean tangents are good, and I think with Alonso, there's a whole lot to unpack. Right, we have, like you mentioned, Spygate, Crashgate. Blocking Lewis in the pits.
Mate, but let's talk about that, Miles, very quickly, because I watched that the other day and I didn't remember. Again, so Alonso's taken the flak for that incident and he was a scumbag. He was a scumbag. He did that deliberately. But let's not forget that Lewis, that they took it in turns on as far as qualifying preference, right? And Lewis was supposed to let Alonso go on the preceding laps and didn't fancy it. Keen to assert his position in that team. So that was the headline will always be, Alonso the scumbag, not like parking up in the pits, not letting Lewis go. But the genesis of that story was that Lewis had done him wrong on track in the first place, right? So I'll forgive him that one. I'd have done the same, Mars, if I'm honest. I would have.
I mean, be careful what you admit. I don't know if we've got any police officers or anyone listening.
Ah.
So, in case you've got any motorway or country road offences, keep it to yourself.
I would have been the same, Miles. Absolutely. I can't lie to you. If mate, I try to be nice and kind on the track and do the old Sterling Moss racing etiquette thing. But if my teammate bloody does something like that, mate, you're gonna get it back twofold. I'm sorry. I don't hate what Alonso did that time.
See, at the time, I remember I was at my parents and watching it in the living room, and my dad was screaming at the TV. Like, so for context, Grenadian background, Grenadian British.
Yes.
So for me, it's like, what are you doing to a fellow
Personal.
Grenadian? It's personal,
Yes.
right? Like, we took Raikkonen win in 2007 personally.
Yeah, snap.
Silence in the
Absolutely.
household.
Yeah,
Whole family went
mourned
quiet.
it. Absolutely.
You know,
No, I'd agree with that. My dad's similar, Miles. We all, but is that not the British? But was that not packaged up with British bias written all over it?
Yes, absolutely. I'm the first. Well, I'm not the first to admit it, but I'll say it. It is British bias because
100% right. I don't even remember that stuff, Miles. The inception, what happened before, because we weren't told.
No, we weren't told. We found out what on gossip sites like Planet F1 and stuff later. You know, you think about it from a Daily Mail perspective. But shout out to people that read it. Shout out to people that don't. I'm not going to get into that. But we hear it from the format that people want it to be presented as. Right. It's the same with Imola. Not Imola. It's the same with Monza last year. Lewis versus Max.
Let's talk about that, Miles. Who's to blame, mate? Since we're quite, there's only a matter of time till we get to Abu Dhabi. Since we're ticking all the controversial boxes.
We're ticking. I would say 80% Max, 20% Lewis.
Why?
Because Max did not have to try and steam down the inside, knowing that one, he was coming from the pits and Lewis was not going to give him any room. Like, if you play F1 on PC or on Xbox or PS, whatever, 5 or 4, you know someone's going to try and block you off. That's a typical place to get cut off. That chicane is not meant for that. And you have sausage curbs, right? And we saw people get put into the barriers at Spa, 2 weeks before or a month before, just before the summer break in GT racing. You know that's a dangerous place to be, right? But at the same time, there was a little margin where I thought, you know what, Lewis, it's do or die here. And metaphorically, of course. And he was showing that, one, I'm not going to back out. I'm not taking this crap anymore, which is fair. It's his right. It's his prerogative. But at the same time, you cost yourself points. Daniel Ricciardo still would have won the race, but you guys could have been second and third. Like, or maybe Danny Rick would have been second. Like, you've got to think about the mentality of these drivers. Absolutely. Are they willing to do a Senna and a Prost, like cost each other the title just because they don't like each other on track? Or are they willing to cost each other, a reputation by insinuating certain things in the media, which we know some drivers are fantastic at, including my own and our own, I'll say that. Like, he's good at that game. So for me, it wasn't like that Lewis was in the wrong, because I don't think he was majorly to blame. The same way I don't think Silverstone was just, Lewis is to blame and he's punted Max off. I watched that race live. It wasn't his fault. We can get into the whole freeze frame. Look at the freeze frame. Oh, look at this still. Look at this image. You're not in the car. And if you've ever been on a motorway or been in an accident, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, he was at fault or she was at fault or they were at fault because, they turned in and you mesmerize every single angle of a wheel. Like, you don't think, oh, did the suspension drop? Did my LSD give way or did it start to jutter out to the left? You don't think like that. And the drivers aren't thinking like that. So bias aside, who was to blame? Lewis majorly for Silverstone. Bias aside, who was to blame? The majority was Max from Monza. Did Max get the penalty? Yes. Did Lewis get a penalty? Yes. Because it's based upon instance, not upon the outcome. Is that right? I don't know, but that's the law. Come at me, Twitter, because I'm fed up of dealing with this whole Silverstone is Lewis is Crash Milton and Max is this and that. I get it. But at the end of the day, one, you're not going to say this to their face. You're going to ask for autograph if you have the $5,000 to spend to go into Paddock Club. Let's be honest.
Go, Miles. True.
And two, unless you're actually a racing driver, whether that's karts all the way up, we really don't know the ins and outs of that corner. Christian Horner says you can't take cops at 200 miles an hour. You can, it's been proved.
Behave.
Vettel did it. Bottas did it.
Behave.
Alonso did it. Raikkonen's done it.
Lewis did it on Charles.
Lewis did it on Charles. And yes, Charles gave him a bit more room. That's because Charles knows that corner isn't one where you necessarily have to dive in. My point is, there's always going to be two sides to the story, and I'm going to stop my rant right now.
Let's go, Miles. I don't really. Here's my theory on Silverstone and Monza. I think they're almost mirror images of each other.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to give racing room always, right? I think the rules dictate that. Well, the rules have changed ever so slightly now, but the old school racing etiquette rules. If somebody goes down the inside of you and gets 2/3 the way, so if the attacker on the inside, if their front wheels come alongside your side pod,
yes,
and you're defending on the outside, then it's their line now, right? You've got to give them racing room in inverted commas. Max didn't do that at Silverstone. He moved across like the line was his and it belonged to him. Well, basic physics, Max. The car can't just disappear into thin air, mate. The car's still there. You got into this habit and this learned this way of behaving in terms of racing etiquette or lack thereof even, and expected Lewis to bloody jump out the way again. So I would apportion the majority, maybe 60% of the blame to Max at Silverstone. Monza, however, hot take here, Miles.
Yeah.
I think here's me. I can't be inconsistent, right? I can't say what I've just said about Silverstone and earning racing room and then apportion blame to Max and then not say the same thing about Lewis in Monza. Yes. It was a super ambitious move that Max tried to pull. Absolutely super ambitious. Don't overtake down there to steal Christian Horner's phrase, but apply it to Monza turn 1. However, somehow, by whatever black magic he was using, he managed to be 2/3 of the way alongside Sir Lewis Hamilton around the outside of turn 1 and into turn 2, if they're categorized like that, at that chicane in Monza. So Miles, then, if you're Sir Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen has earned, at the very least, one car's width racing room between the left side of that Mercedes, Sir Lewis Hamilton's, and the inside of the turn, surely. So I always, contrary to popular opinion, I figured that Lewis should have given him just a bit more racing room at Monza. I think they're mirror images of each other. Look at us, bloody rerunning 2021, Miles. I've got PTSD again now, mate, talking about
we're gonna get cancelled. I need a stronger drink than this water. It's not gonna be enough.
Go.
and I don't even drink. But thinking about that and just thinking about the impact of, I'm not going to touch on Abu Dhabi. That's a whole nother podcast. I know it is.
Let's do it. We may as well whilst we're here, Miles. We're going to have to at this stage, but go on.
Because I've got 20 minutes and I've got the dog and outside, and my wife wants to come in the living room side.
In real life stuff.
Real life. But looking at Abu Dhabi, right? We've got a situation where rules are broken. Let's be completely straight. But all this about any does not mean all. I did law to a degree, right? So Christian Horner, that doesn't make sense. And I did as a master's, it doesn't make sense. Bear in mind, I didn't pass the master's, but anyway, that's where we are. But my point is, we got to a situation where Mercedes knew that there was going to be something controversial. You don't bring a QC. No. You don't bring a QC to a race.
Absolutely.
Someone that represents Manchester City in one of the biggest anti-corruption cases in the world. Someone who gets paid nearly 800,000. I'm not even going to go into his numbers because I'll fudge them, and I don't want him to come after me. But you don't bring one of the world's best lawyers and best legal teams to a race where you know there's going to be controversy if controversy is not going to take place. But even on the last lap where Max got past Lewis, if you look at it from the other angle, I think there's one that's gone around Twitter for the last 8 months or so. Max intended, or he moved his car towards Lewis's. It was significantly alongside. But did he intend to make the corner? He made it, because Max always does. But did he have the intention to make it? We don't know. But all I know is that Lewis's car juddered, and I don't think that was because his tires were cold. So take from that what you will. Rules are broken. Max was a champion that was deserved across the first 2/3 of the season. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, let's go, Miles.
That's what I'm going to say.
So here's where I'm going to have to tread carefully, right? I don't disagree with anything that you've just said.
Mm-hmm.
I've got questions though, Miles.
Sure.
So I listen to Christian. I rate Christian. I don't really like him, but I rate Christian Horner highly as far as the ability. Yeah, as far as the ability to get things done, Miles.
Yeah.
Again, this is me leaning on my ability to separate the person from the team principal, right? I don't have to like him. He's not my friend, nor will he ever be my best friend. But I see how he conducts himself as far as managerially, and like he gets things done. I've always said, if I'm going to take one of them between Toto and Christian into the trenches with me, taking Christian every time, Miles. I don't care. Standard. I do not care. If it's trenches, that's my decision. And I'm
going to war, you take him.
I'm sticking until such time as he doesn't like me and then he stabs me in my back. I'm taking Christian. I'm taking Christian, I'm telling you. So with that, in that context, then, Miles, I watched Christian's speech or his talk at the Cambridge Union the other day. Yeah. And I don't disagree with anything that you said. It was injustice, and there was a precedent set by Massey himself, only races earlier around the safety car protocol that weren't adhered to in Abu Dhabi. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But again, in the context of Christian Horner versus Toto Wolff, if you've been at meetings, right, and you understand that there is a drive to go racing, in inverted commas, wherever possible, you see Michael Massey's decision-making has been woefully inconsistent, consistently inconsistent at best. Do you not okay, so you've got track position, cool. Yeah. But you have to bake this knowledge into your decision-making, surely. Now, I'm not saying that they should have pitted Lewis. What I am saying, however, is that none of us, Miles, should have been surprised that they were willing to break/bend precedent and rules as far as the code of contact and the FIA regulations in the final race of what was an epic season. None of us, Miles, should have been surprised. The brake test, they didn't even put 5 seconds for a brake test. What?
Yeah. What you get more at your local casting track. Like you get black flagged for 3 races, I think it is, or whole season, depending.
What are we doing, Miles? Yeah. Overcrowding turn 4 Brazil. So
I forgot about that.
Mate, all of that. Don't even investigate it. Well, why? Clearly, because you're wary of the Netflixization of F1 and what it means for the bottom line of Liberty Media. Yeah. And in what was an epic season, they were always gonna bend or break if they needed to, Miles. Because that's what they've been doing. I'll tell you a cheeky story that I've never told anyone, Miles. Break some news. I have a mate of a mate who was working as a steward at Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
And they're obviously in radio communication with the race directors at I don't want to get you cancelled, Miles. You tell me to stop.
I don't want to get you in trouble, mate.
I'll tell the story. It's not my story. I'm hearing it secondhand, but from a trusted source. The stewards were told initially to slow down the clearing up of the car, right, Latifi's, to chill out on the. So the plan was, I'm insinuating here, allegedly, so that nobody gets cancelled or sued. Allegedly, the plan from the racing director's perspective was initially to end under safety car, and then something changed. And the communication to the stewards was, hurry up, get the car off the track. We need to go racing. So there was a clear conflict in terms of the agenda that they were looking to. I think they realized there was some communication, and there was a realization that they needed to end this race as a race and not under safety car. And they bent/broke the rules, Miles.
I mean, I'm not disputing that, because I think even watching it live, you could see that there was a pause. Mate. It was like,
Arch.
okay, yeah, get the safety car out. Toto screaming, no safety car, Michael. This is not, no, he said that this is wrong afterwards. Then all of a sudden, Jonathan Wheatley's on the phone, and I can say the names just because it's fact.
Yeah,
like
this is true.
He's on the radio saying, we need to go motor racing, blah blah blah.
It
and
only
then
takes one racing lap.
Only takes one racing lap, and then as if by magic, 28 seconds later, any lapped cars may
unlap themselves,
but
not all of them.
But not all. Not all.
Oh my gosh! Leave science.
Not all cars who are suffering in dirty air can get some clean air. Not all cars who don't have championship implications. And I think what that did for me, and it did for many others who I've spoken to, it broke their trust in the sport, right? And not just the sport, but the FIA. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm an endurance fan. I love bikes. I ride. Anything with 2 wheels, 4 wheels, and an engine, I'm watching it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's covered by the FIA. We can't change that, unfortunately, even down to the local karting track. So when you're doing that on the biggest stage, and when you've got people like Paddy Power and William Hill, they even ran an ad the other day on Twitter saying, is this season going to end in a title decider or something? When they're giving out double odds. Saying,
yeah, of course they are.
I'm sorry, Lewis Hamilton versus Max. And this isn't Max's fault. This is another thing we need to sort of clear up. I may take jokes and I like a few things that say Max VO or Max Fraud Stappen and stuff. That's just because of his conduct at Saudi Arabia. That's not because of Abu Dhabi. That wasn't his fault.
Yeah,
right. Otherwise, Lewis would have kicked off a whole lot more. We can't have this scenario where rules are being broken for entertainment purposes. Because
absolutely.
Do you go to the workplace and then say, you know what? I'm bored today. I'm going to kick up a fuss. I'm going to rewrite the rules. And by the way, you're going to pay me X amount more because, it makes me feel better. Or
unacceptable.
Because, this management team or what did that. I mean, YouTube, if you want to pay me more when I do get monetized, please feel free. but
let's go.
We can't do that.
I would agree with that. That is cool. And that's the salient point. However, Mars, I'm going to ask you another rhetorical question just to be provocateur Cameron F1.
Yeah.
Watching, have you rewatched the last lap since?
I have, sadly.
What do you think of the way that Lewis drove? Off the restart, Miles.
You really want to get me cancelled now.
Just being that objective, honest. Again, we've already stated injustice Abu Dhabi shouldn't have happened. Lewis, by rights, if they follow the rules, should be champion. Cool. Let's put a pin in that. Go on then. What do you think of how Lewis drove that final?
I'm staring into my mic because I don't know what I'm going to say. No, in all reality, I think the hard tires did affect him. Like if you look at how he had to overcome the gap between Max and then leave Sergio and then gap Max again, 11 seconds. Just saying.
Let's go.
I do think he had a bit of a defeatist moment, which we all would have, right? So he's thinking, oh my gosh, like he said in his Vanity Fair article, the championship's been stolen from me, but there's no way they're going to take it away from me. How could they do this? Blah, blah, blah. So maybe for a couple of seconds or even milliseconds, he's thinking, there's no point, right? So he gets almost gapped off the line. Like he gets chased around a couple of corners. Then Max decides, I'm going to execute a move down into turn 6. Lewis left the door wide open. Let's be clear. But I do think he did so for 2 reasons. One, that angle of that footage I mentioned that was going around on Twitter shows that Max made contact with Lewis's car. So one, he believes that Max might, or he could have believed that Max had intention to wipe him out regardless, and Max was going to be champion. But secondly, I think Lewis is thinking, okay, cool, I might get him on the switchback. Maybe, I'll let Max take the inside and then I'll take the... I'll let Max get the apex and then I'll take the inside and then use acceleration.
But you can't ever let Max get the inside. Never.
Look at Max on the restart of, I think it's the second restart in Saudi last year.
Don't let him get up your inside.
3 cars. He went past Esteban, Lewis, Valtteri. He did it at Mexico around the outside.
Oh, yes.
Like off the start. The dude can control a car. It's not like we... And this is where the argument goes against Max, just going back to it earlier. Like when he can control a car, he can. He knows how to do it. But anyway,
levels.
You can't let Max get the inside out of that and expect to get reverse grip going back in. Maybe Lewis is thinking, you know what, I'm better than this kid. And to be fair, he is. But he wasn't at that point in time because of the situation, because of the tires, because of the lack of grip, because of his attitude potentially thinking, I'm going to lose this because I don't have the straight line speed. Like, we forget that just because Merck had a rocket ship since Brazil, that Red Bull didn't gap Lewis and Mercedes in Abu Dhabi qualifying by, what was it, 4 or 6 tenths? That's a lot of lap time you're leaving. So you can't leave that going down the main straight into turn 7 thinking, yeah, okay, it's going to be cool. And to his credit, Lewis did well to chase, follow, but by that point, his tires were dusted. It was done. We knew what was going to happen. We saw what happened next. He left the door open. In my opinion, that was his only fault off the race. And I'll hand over to yourself.
Do I get us cancelled, Miles? Do I talk honestly? Go on. All right. So I'll talk honestly. I'll talk honestly. I disagree with you on. I think Max surprised him in the overtake.
Okay.
I think in Lewis's head, he expected it to develop a couple turns after the big long straight, right?
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point.
But interestingly, DRS wouldn't even be relevant, right? Because you need 3 laps. So that's interesting.
So
I think, I don't know, they probably would have enabled it to help Max, right? I think the jokes. I think I will forgive Lewis the actual overtake again, older tyres. Max has got brand new softs, etc., etc. Lewis's thinking was, I need to defend off the back of this long straight. And in order to do that, I need to straight line the corner, right?
Yes.
To make sure I maximize my exit speed. I'll forgive him that. The surprise aspect is absolutely a thing. My concern, Miles, and where I Lewis is my driver. I love him to bits, but I'm a racer and I will critique it, right? I'm not sure that Lewis maximized the restart.
Got you. Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. I always suspected, I watched it live and I was like, did he go at the right time? He did a dummy and he did a dummy. And then I was like, did he go at the right time? And I was never quite sure. It was always conjecture and speculation until this year when you saw Charles Leclerc conduct himself in a way that Lewis absolutely should have off the restart. And here's what I mean by that. If a guy's going to pull out that old Max Verstappen trick where you pull alongside the dude, right? If you're going to do that, there's a way to make that a disadvantage. And here's what you do, right? You go, if you're going on the right hander, and this is Max, so we're going this way round, as was Abu Dhabi, I think.
Yes.
Go as the lead guy.
Yeah.
When this fella is at his most acute to the apex, because then he can't jump on the loud pedal, Miles.
No.
That's the way to do it. And you know what? It's more speculation. Again, probably wouldn't have made any difference. So fresh was Max's tyres, but we will never know, Miles.
We don't know.
Lewis absolutely was not perfect off that restart. But again, he's traumatized. They manipulated it, man. So again, maybe we can't blame him, Miles. But
it's a farce. Lewis, I'm going to add 2007 to it because that's McLaren's fault.
Mate.
And 2012, if McLaren had, and please, McLaren, I love you as a team.
What was 2007 McLaren's fault for the tyres? China.
So China, should have been called in earlier.
Was that not Lewis's fault though? Did he not do a Lando in?
It was his Lando moment. The team should have. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. But then they could have appealed. Because I think there was a regular fuel arrangement with Raikkonen and Ferraris.
I did not know this.
If I remember correctly, I'll have to go and check it. I'll go back to a couple of sources I saw online. I'll send it to you afterwards.
Ping it.
So they could have appealed it, but I think Lewis said, I don't want to win that way. And that's why it became a massive thing last year when it was is Lewis
same thing again?
So take that into account. Take 2012 into account where his car was breaking and he managed to still be in the title fight towards the end.
Wild.
He could be a 10-time world champion.
Mate.
We're acknowledging the GOAT of GOATs in the world of F1. I'm not going to say motorsport because we've got people like Sebastian Ogier. We've got real class acts. Jonathan Rea, World Superbikes, Marquez, Valentino Rossi. But in terms of in F1, there's never been anyone better. Come at me with your facts for anyone better. Talk to me about how many races there are in per season. Do the breakdown, and then maybe Sebastian Vettel's 9 wins in a row could still be like the benchmark. Max might do that this season. Max might break the amount of wins in a season, and he might do 9 on the bounce. Wait, how many races do we have left? 9?
I want to say there's 9. We have got a few left though.
Yeah, Max could do it. So that's where I stand. But I know we're running out of time, so I wanted to quickly touch on this year. So I know we've spoken about like biggest impacts and Max versus Charles in Bahrain. In terms of your thoughts towards the Lewis versus George narrative, personally, I'm not a fan of the way that Sky have phrased it. Right? It's Lewis is conducting experiments, but George is better, and George is giving high praise to Lewis and blah 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 X Y Z. And Sky, you said it, so you can't come at me. It's out there. Yeah, you said it at Miami. You said it at practice. You said it and then when George qualified 14th or 15th, maybe he just didn't have a best of day. And that's not to take away from George, right? George is a fantastic driver. But where do you see the I don't want to say narrative, but where do you see their driver pairing going for the rest of the season? Do you see Lewis continuing to not dominate, but to make those steps that we know he will take as he's not conducting major experiments anymore? Or do you think that George will keep it neck and neck?
So I'm glad you strayed away from using the word dominate. Yeah, Nico Rosberg at Imola, because that's what he thought was happening to Sir Lewis Hamilton. Again, I feel like it's lazy, low-hanging journalistic tropes to say something like that and not pay attention to the fact around Imola, for example, that Lewis Hamilton started on the dirty side of the grid. George Russell got a rocket fuel start, but then Lewis was hampered by a dodgy pit stop that happened a lap later than it should have, as everybody was changing tyres. So there are these nuances that the likes of Nico, bless him, very conveniently forgot and just discounted, neglected to mention. I mean, there was the bloody even earlier in the season, I want to say, not Australia, maybe
Saudi.
Oh, right. Yeah, Saudi potentially, when Danny Rick parked up in the pit. There was all these things that you want to take into account, plus the testing stuff that you said, that Lewis is bearing the burden of extra weight potentially.
Yep.
And so I think it's a conversation, Miles, around, to broaden it out ever so slightly, around the responsibility of journalists. And I think there are challenger content creators like Miles on the Grid as an example, cheeky plug. But genuinely, Miles, it's a really important point, right? Who are going to be putting the likes of Sky Sports, F1, and others feet to the fire, right? Because you're educated, you've got a bit of charisma about you, and you're SH1T hot on the facts. So you're not,
you're too kind,
mate. So you're not genuinely, mate. This is where the space is going, right? You're going to be, you have the credibility sufficient to call these dudes out on their nonsense. Slash SH1T, because it is nonsense and it feels a bit propaganda-y sometimes. To your question, Mars, very quickly as we round third base, cream always rises to the top, right? And my gut tells me that, as it did at the start of the season, that things will normalize towards the end of it. So a lot of my subscribers are like, mate, what are you talking about, Lewis? You can't even beat George, let alone Max. And I said, listen, how about we reconvene at the end of race 22 or 21, however many there is. Let's view these things in longer form and sack off the recency bias thing, right? I think Lewis will, at the end, when all is told, barring anomalies and accidents, I think Lewis will handily see to George Russell come the end of the season. But it's important to look at it then and not now, because it's nuanced, and there are these anomalies baked into their score, their points tally as at August of 2022.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that Lewis will have I don't say the drop on George, because I don't think there's anything wrong with George's driving style. In fact, his defensive driving is one of the best in the grid. Like Spain, what he did at Spain.
Let's go. Let's go, King George.
Like he's he's the heir apparent to Lewis. That's a fact. Like, there's a reason why Toto didn't want him to go to Red Bull. Let's not forget, Christian Horner and Helmut Marko said they would be happy to take George if Toto doesn't make up his mind.
Yeah.
However, what that would have played out as, we don't know, because does Max really want that level of competition? I'm not going to touch on that. That's a video coming to another day. But in terms of what they're doing, would you say that this is going to be, it's not going to be a toxic comment, but it's going to be something which I think will inspire debate for the future, and something which I know might leave a legacy of my own. Is this Lewis's Schumacher moment? Hear me out. Because is Lewis, I know he's been through building the team. Like, everyone says, oh, he's been, like, he got gifted the engine as if, like, Michael built it from scratch himself, right? And they were very fortunate. They had a bit of an updated knowledge of the regs beforehand. Lewis went through a reg change in 17, a small one in 19, technically one in 21, and he still dominated. Like, it's not like he was just putting, porridge out there and getting and eating something else. He still dominated. But is this his moment where he's shown the public, the general public, not just the British one, that he can take a struggling team? Everyone could say, oh, third fastest car on the grid. That team is struggling. When Lando Norris is getting a podium at Imola, you're struggling. Yeah.
Oh.
And that's not anything against Lando, but they weren't the fastest car that day, or third fastest. So for Lewis to take this team, really wrap them around him. Mercedes have gone through key personnel changes, like Ben Hodgkinson leaving. You've got people going to Aston Martin. Someone went to Haas, I think, as well. Lewis is now focusing, and George, they're both leading that team, crafting it into their mold. And if they can bring that car to become a race-winning car in the second half of the season, is that his Schumacher moment where he shows the world, you know what, sod it, I am at that level. I've built the team around me. I've done what, unfortunately, Daniel Ricciardo couldn't do at Renault, but he's tried. And he will finally get the plaudits that he deserves. Because I'm fed up of hearing it's just the car. It's not the car, man. I've got a Renault Megane RS. I love that thing to death. Does that make me the fastest car driver in the world? No, it doesn't. Like, let's stop it. Stop.
Let's go, Miles. The simple answer to your proposition is yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's go. I'm down with that 100%. Got nothing more to add. The only thing I disagree with you on is the final portion of that stanza being he will finally get his credit. Some people will never give Sir Lewis Hamilton credit. They just won't. They just won't. And that's cool. I've reconciled and squared myself with that. My emotional intelligence is sufficient to understand and be able to pass out the drivers of that. I mean, he should already, the 7-time world champion, what are we doing? He should already have more than sufficient credit, but some people still want to deny him. Yeah, Georgie's quicker, all that stuff. Yeah, well, let's come back in a few months' time at the end of the season and see where we are. No, you've nailed it, Mars. Nothing further to add. The prosecution rests. Further questions. No, you've nailed it there, bruv. Genuinely, I love that final point that you've made. And I think people need to give Sir Lewis Hamilton now in August of 2022, especially on the back of his being so open and honest with his pain in the Vanity Fair article, Abu Dhabi last year, race, everything. Miles, I'll be honest, I couldn't handle it. You're having a laugh. I would have sacked it off last year. That's how resilient I am. And the average Joe Bloggs is. No, Sir Lewis Hamilton is back in a tractor of a car, doing his best, like you said, very eloquently, to galvanize the team around him. Listen, put some respect on that fella's name and give Sir Lewis Hamilton his flowers like Miles on the Grid just has done. Let's go. Let's go.
I think, you see, when you spoke about Christian Horner being that guy that you want in the trenches, I don't disagree. Like, he's the guy that you want to take to war with you, because regardless of whether he's right or wrong, he will go to fight for his team. I think that Lewis is the same way. He might argue with his engineers, and I've seen one engineer come out on Twitter, or there was some sort of quote from an ex-engineer saying, he's not as technical. Okay, cool. What do you want him to do? Design the car? Do your job for you? But at the same time, he has a skill set which is, one, motivational. Like, you don't galvanize however many million Instagram and Twitter followers he has just from being an average Joe. Like, look at the rest of the grid. including those who are champions. Seb Vettel aside, because he's just going to go straight to the top. But he's got a level of charisma. He's got a level of intelligence, which people underestimate, whether that's because of, and I'll put it out there, whether that's because of race, whether that's because of how he was parachuted into the sport, or whether that's because they just don't like him because apparently he doesn't pay enough tax for them, despite being in the top 500 taxpayers in the UK, whilst everyone else lives in Monaco, who's British.
Bang, good man. I'm glad you said that point.
Let's talk on that. That's a serious thing. But he's now at the crux of his career where he can finally, well, I say finally, I know you said he doesn't need to, but I looked at something, an old, either race fans or Piston Heads archived forum where people are saying that Michael Schumacher is just the car. We don't want it to get to the stage where 20 years or 10 years down the line, Lewis has to wait 10 years to get his dues. Give a man his flowers now, buy him the bouquet, let him ride off into the sunset after he's got his 8th, 9th, well, official 8th, 9th, and 10th World Championships, and then let him move on. I digress. Last question for you, sir, because I know that time is against us, and I don't want to keep you too long as well. I have a question from one of our listeners. So they've asked questions around like the technical changes that are coming to Spa, as well as the technical changes that are coming to the 2026. So the question was around, with the updated regulations having been announced for 23, with a raise of the diffuser throw, an increase of the ride height by 15 mil instead of the original proposed 25 mil. Do you think this was a play that was done mainly on safety grounds, or a ploy done by certain teams, maybe Mercedes included, to frustrate others at the top or around them?
How dare the asker of that question insinuate any underhandedness from any F1 team and or the FIA? They have never ever done anything like that in the past before. No. Definitely not party mode at the hands of Mercedes.
Well,
mate, we all know there's. I'm being sarcastic, Mars. The FIA have always been on the FIA stands for Ferrari International Assistance. Lest we forget, it's the oldest story in history that F1's always been super marginal. But to the question, I can't. I'm too old and grey, Mars, and too long in the tooth to ever again underestimate the FIA's alleged ability to be underhanded. Again, this is there is a dotted line between sports and entertainment, especially where F1 is concerned. On the back of Netflix, on the back of the bumper results, the bumper Q2 results that Liberty Media had 744 million revenue. Yes. Again, humongous, absolute gangbusters results. So now more than ever, it is important with a view to consolidate the new fan base, the new users, the oft sought after 18 to 35-year-olds that Netflix has been so brilliant at driving and putting F1 before. And so with that said, of course, mate, they're going to try and make it. What they can't have is anyone, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, running away with the championship and making it boring. This can't be Michael Schumacher 2000 to 2004, Miles. Yeah. Because people are going to dial out, and Liberty Media aren't going to make the bumper profits that they're hoping to make between now and whenever. So it's
what do you mean? No, what do you mean, man? Because Bernie Ecclestone said, we're not marketing to we're not marketing people to kids.
Well, in Bernie's defense, Miles, it sounds ridiculous now that you say it back verbatim, but in Bernie's defense, he was a relic, a dinosaur now, but he did things. He was just like Lord Sugar running around doing all these dodgy deals, right, and ruling with an iron fist. But between him and Max Mosley, theirs was a managerial style that suited the kind of that time in F1, that F1 era. In 2022, though, now with the advent of social media, all encompassing as it is, that the importance of 18 to 35-year-olds now, because listen, I'm not going to be here forever. We're
Yeah.
like we're
Yeah,
dying
yeah,
off, Miles.
yeah. We're getting old.
The diehards that are going to be here, they don't care about, they don't need to pitch us because we're going to be here regardless, right?
Mm,
They need to grow North America and continue to hit the 18 to 35s because that's where the real big bucks are ultimately. And I think I again, Miles, to my point, I will never ever again underestimate the FI's ability or proclivity even towards shifting rules to
mm.
try and exacerbate, accentuate even competition when it's not there. Absolutely. Like really? Are you making those changes for? No, you're
Yeah,
making those changes with the bottom line in mind because Miles, that's the precedent that they've set, and that's what they've always done, and that's what they always will do. So don't be surprised then if in Spa all of a sudden Mercedes or somebody else is like super, super quick putting it on pole because
yeah, yeah.
that's what the rules are intended to do. Party mode. We've seen it a million times before, Miles, and we will see it again. Older story in F1 history that to the questioner's question. It's yeah, I wouldn't surprise me. They'll do it again. And you know what the joke is, Miles? I'll make this hot take.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, they'll find something else to change.
100%. 100%. I think there's, I'm not going to quote Ferrari because I really have a passion for Ferrari. And I do want to get a couple of people on the show.
Admirably.
Admirably, regardless of what we do, for some reason, I leave a weekend in tears. But there was a question mark around Charles Leclerc's throttle pedal and the accentuator.
I heard.
And is that something that will potentially be clamped down on or replicated by teams? Is the new wing from Aston Martin that looks like a scythe blade?
Just looks like the old wing, Miles. Like
it looks like the old wing. Is it going to push dirty air back on? Every team copies it, and then F1 decides, we're going to ban it for safety grounds, or like.
So here's where you get the answer to your question, Miles. So long as it's not affecting, so long as somebody doesn't use it to great effect to gap the rest of the teams and completely diminish competition, which again is the lifeblood of Liberty Media's bottom line. So long as that doesn't happen,
yeah,
cool, calm. Nobody's going to bat an eyelid, right? If Aston Martin's wing saw them a million miles down the road, Miles. Well, let's change that mid-season. All those rules they can flex just like the Aston Martin wing. I don't. It's a nonsense, Miles. I'm never underestimate the FIA's ability for F-Ruis, if I can say that. Oh,
no. Thank you. We're trying to keep it PG, Mum.
There we go. I did my
touching,
best.
No, you did, man. You did. I do appreciate it. And I'm thinking, I know finally, I'm not going to touch on Spa. Like Spa will bring what Spa brings. Spa is always something where we can't predict, right? Like last year was basically
madness
of a flood. But when it comes to F1 prioritizing money over fans, money over people, I have intentions to go to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, right? I'm saving my 20p's and my 2 pennies together. And
let's go.
Try to rub them into something that may not ever materialize. But when you see that F1 have got plans to work with promoters and the head of the MGM Grand and the Bellagio Hotel and all that stuff to offer packages to fans that are worth, I think it's $100,000 or $110,000, aka £90,000, like sterling.
Mad.
Or whatever that could be in euros, which is going to be an insane amount. Where do we go from here? Because don't get me wrong, some of us may have that money and you can spend that on a weekend. Great, fantastic. You're a billionaire. Your life is good in some parts, but it's not going to be great in others. But how is it that we can ever expect to capture the wider imagination of an audience if Miami came and we had £10,000 tickets, and we're not talking Paddock Club, and then we've got Las Vegas, which should be a stellar event, maybe a bit boring on track perspective, but as an event, it'll bang. I think so. But you're outpricing the fans. How does that work? Where do we go as a sport from here?
Mars, it's a good question, but I just say to you, mate, listen. I think the common theme here of this Miles on the Grid podcast is naivety.
Yeah,
this
it's true.
this Miles has always been the way historically.
It's true.
F1 as a sport belongs to the upper echelons of the financial class, right? Middle and upper classes have been the
Yes.
only dudes and dudettes that have been able to attend Grand Prix and experience it proper. This is the truth. And sack that off, Miles. Even if you're going to talk about sitting at home and watching it on your TV, how much is your Sky subscription? If you're going to do it the proper way and not find a street, how much is your
We
Sky
don't do
Sports
that.
subscription? We definitely don't do that, Miles. Never ever have I.
Never.
But it's not cheap,
No, it's
Miles.
not. It's not.
There have been many an argument had in the Cameron household about Sky subscriptions costs. They're not there.
Yeah.
They show up on your bill at the end of the month. It's not cheap, Miles. So listen, I don't know. I don't know what the panacea or the silver bullet is to solve it. I almost feel like Liberty Media are incentivized to continue in this same vein, Miles, only because if you look at, they're looking to grow their top line.
Yes.
They're looking to nail America. And because of the Netflixization of F1 and the newfound popularity amongst people with money in 1835s, they can do it. They wouldn't do it, Miles, if people weren't going to buy these ridiculous. If 0 people bought them, then it wouldn't work, would it?
This is the thing. People will buy.
People are going to buy those bonkers packages. They will.
Yeah.
They just will, Miles. F1 is the hot sport, and it's a part. They describe it in their quarterly results or the review of as a part. Everything is a concert, especially the North American ones, right? So people are going to want to get there. It's an event. It's not just a race anymore. It's an event. And you're going to go there. DJ Khaled's going to be there. Serena and Venus are going to be there. Lewis, of course, like it's a
festival.
But there you go, Miles. Perfect word. It's a festival, and people ultimately are going to pay their money. Like it is, unfortunately, Miles, what it is. And again, the older story in F1 history. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bills.
Of course, you had to drop that reference.
Be in there, Miles. Apropos.
Of course. Well, look, I think it's definitely something that the sport needs to think about because, yes, I think for Silverstone, I was trying to get tickets for my parents and myself, and I wanted to sort of treat them. I'm seeing like 700, 800 pounds, and I'm thinking, is it worth it? Like, do you drop that amount or do you contribute to the house fund? Right? Do you?
No brainer, Miles.
You go Silverstone, right?
You must be joking. No chance.
I lost the argument, as you can tell. But
no chance. I can't even make that argument, Miles. How? And I like to argue. Yeah. There is no foundation. Motion completely overruled. 700 quid, Miles, and they go to lot. They go upwards, right? Those are some of the cheapest ones that you can get.
Yeah. Easy.
$5,000, $10,000 for paddock passes. Are you?
I was at Austria, what, 2017? And I think paddock passes a 5K then. And that was just before, or was it just after Liberty took over? I think Chase Carey was CEO, something like that. That was insane. Barcelona, I went to 2018.
How?
Still 7K.
How rude, Miles. How rude.
It's a lot.
5 to 10K. But again, I need to pipe down because people are clearly buying them. People are buying them. They quoted it in the results, Miles. That the purchasing of paddock passes on the back of COVID, record numbers, selling out all of those 5 to 10K tickets. So going to keep happening. If people are buying them, supply and demand, then they'll keep offering, and the prices only go up with hyperinflation being 10% or whatever.
Yeah, what was it? 10% today? It's rumored to be like 13% in September, which is...
Mate, I think that's undercooked anyway. Even that being an accountant, I reckon it's more real world inflation, about 15%. But again, another conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, don't scare me. We'll start talking politics and all sorts of all things globalization.
Yeah.
But,
mate.
Yeah, it's mad. But no, I do think F1 and the world of motorsport in general, like DTM's still selling their tickets at like 30 quid, which is nice. I appreciate it.
No one goes.
I'm not commenting. I've got a DTM driver I'm trying to line up for 2 weeks.
Oh, bless him.
But I do think there's stuff that we can take away in the world of F1 from places like World Superbikes, from what Dorna are doing in terms of how they structure. Not what they're doing with MotoGP, because no one's attending races anymore and the prices are going through the roof. But in terms of BSB, WSBK, you're looking at £40 tickets. You get access to the paddock. You get access to like the food centre. You can meet the drivers. I went to Cops. I was sitting on my ones chilling because my wife was ill. It was fantastic. I had a great time. Yeah, and I could touch the bikes. I could see them.
Oh, mate!
Bring that level of excitement back in. Like for 40 quid. Come on, that's a no-brainer.
It would be incredible.
But it wouldn't
I tell you what, Miles, as well, I watch a lot of UFC, and one thing that they managed to do incredibly well during COVID is grow their business because of the access that they grant to the fighters. And I will say, I mean, if Miles on the Grid could have a Sir Lewis Hamilton on and sit down and have that, can you imagine that level of access would absolutely continue to grow the sport exponentially? But they're not, because there's so many sponsors involved and there's all this gatekeeping going on and guardrails. It's so difficult for content creators to get access to the likes of a Sir Lou. Sadly, it may never happen, Miles.
Wow. But it's hard for some content creators. I'm going to chuck that out there. Come at me.
You see what Miles did there? And that's a shame, Miles. It's a shame. Because it's a missed opportunity. Even if we're getting financial again and talking purely from the perspective of Liberty Media's bottom line, per UFC as a case study, increased access to the main assets of F1, being the drivers, would absolutely continue to. It would help continue to grow the sport exponentially. UFC is proof positive of that, and it's a shame. Miles.
It's a real shame. I think the only way that I could see it doing is if the relevant security was in place. Because if you look at someone like Lewis, for example, I mean, we know why Lewis has bodyguards and why he needs them. I'm not going to undercut that reasoning. But I do also think the sponsor side, sponsors are thinking, do I want to mingle with the general public? I've got $2 billion in my bank account. Why do I want to see Joe Bloggs from down the road? It's risk reverse. It's a sport initially designed for elites that are trying to work their way backwards, and they're trying to reverse engineer. So,
Miles,
let's see what happens. No, not even. Let's see how they Joe Rogan F1, and if they can Joe Rogan F1, then they've cracked the Da Vinci Code. And
it's coming, Miles. It's coming. I'm telling you, when you look at the landscape, that you can't listen, when that stuff is ready to happen, right, in any space. Joe Rogan is the pioneer, right?
Yeah.
But when that stuff, when that stuff is the zeitgeist, when the world is ready to accept a chap like Joe Rogan just talking breeze, and he does talk breeze and reckless.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time till F1 expands into that sort of spaces. They're coming. Honestly, Miles, it's coming. Might not be today, might not be 12, 24 months from now, but it's honestly, mate, it's a case of if, not when, not if even. Absolutely a case of when, not if. But I digress, Miles.
No, that's fine. Well, look, man, I've kept you for far too long. I've just checked the time on my Mac. It's way past dinner time, and I don't want to get you or myself into trouble.
No, don't be daft.
Is there anything that you'd like your or my listeners to know about you? You know, your Cameron, your pugilist.
I'm just
I'm accountant extraordinaire.
I'm just an old F1 fan, an old and grey, long in the tooth F1 fan with a rinky-dink YouTube channel, doing watch-alongs and F1 commentary and starting F1 fires. So you can catch me at Cameron F1 on YouTube and Cameron F1 YT on Twitter. And again, if you like decent debates like Miles has on Miles on the Grid, then feel free to jump over and listen to some F1 back and forth always. That's all that we do on that channel over there. Love it.
Amazing. Well, I think the debate aspect has definitely kept me engaged. And to all my listeners, those of you that are out there and those of you that are tuning in for the first time, I think if you can follow Cameron and support him in any way, I don't know, do you have a Patreon or YouTube?
No, not yet. You can jump on it. Listen, when I do my streams, if you, no one's under any obligation to donate, of course, but there is the facility to, if you want to donate. Again, all of that stuff is appreciated because we're looking to take these things full time, and myself and Miles on the Grid and content creators such like. And finally, Miles, the only other thing I'd add is, listen, mate, congratulations on all the good work that you're doing. Because again, honestly, mate, no, I mean this honestly. I'm not just saying it because we're mates now. To talk objectively and respectfully and have healthy dialogue about F1 is, mate, it's a lost art. You can't even find the content creators that are out here doing what you're doing. So listen, as much as I want you guys to come across the Cameron F1 and follow me on YouTube, subscribe, make sure you rate, review Miles on the Grid, support this chap if he's got pay, all of that good stuff, because content creators like Miles on the Grid are few and far between. And we don't, listen, Miles, you ever talk to your guys about the amount of time that, I mean, we were talking offline before, right? This is bandwidth heavy. Miles is out here, it's late, and me and Miles are having a conversation at risk of getting divorces and all sorts. So,
I hope not.
So support me too. So support your guy Miles out here, because he's doing. Look at the background. I mean, look at the audio is there. Wicked F1 content that Miles on the Grid is creating. So salute to you, sir. Definitely give that dude his flowers and support him. Rate, review, all that good stuff, because it's important that we back the content creators that give us the content that we want to hear and see, right?
No, I agree, but you're way too kind with your words.
Oh, mate,
Cameron's out here performing Shakespeare, and it's dark arts on this.
The prosecution rests no further questions, Your Honour.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. As Cameron mentioned, if you'd love to listen to more episodes, please go back into the archives, either on Apple, Spotify, Google podcasts, wherever you get your favorite show. And we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.